Welcome to the Gresham-Barlow Board of Education Board Policy Committee, June 9th, 2025. In attendance, Chris Howard and Dr. Tracy Klinger. We are looking at a few policies that will be brought to the board for approval. This committee reviews policies and does not make final decision on the policies. Looks like we have a couple and then one that came back from before.
Yeah. So wellness is one that was flagged actually by the Oregon Department of Education as they were doing some of our nutrition services work.
Okay.
And as we've kind of dug into it a little bit, it looks like we made some revisions during the 22-23 kind of cycle of policies. And this one was adopted in 23. And then there were more revisions made in 23-24, and it looks like maybe we missed like that round because we just had approved the policy. So the one that has the red on it, Chris, is the one that is recommended by OSBA. So you have a blank one that's our current, and we were just kind of doing a little side by side.
So, okay, I'll just say right off the top, why not culturally responsive? Why comprehensive?
Well, I'm not sure about that either. And in 22-23, they had us revise it to culturally responsive. So I don't know. I feel like some of these are legislated things, and there's also different parts where it asks us to write goals for a variety of different things. So it gives us some examples, and I have some recommendations based on their examples, and then we're probably going to need some other feedback.
And I suppose within comprehensive district, it includes, if it's comprehensive, it includes all students.
Yeah.
So it would include cultural.
Yep. And there are places where I feel like that came out in another section. Like there's a part in one of the goals where it's nutrition education will include culturally relevant.
Which would be one of the things that would go into our bids when we bid out.
Yeah.
So, and then I'm just jumping ahead and seeing where the reds are. So it's the board's commitment to providing adequate time for instruction. Okay, I mean, it's a good thing. How are we measuring that then if it's the board's?
And we previously had said the program shall reflect commitment to time.
Right.
So
where, let's see, the program, there we go. So basically they thought that was a little bit too vague. Who's reflecting the commitment?
I guess, and the providing adequate time versus just time. So ours previously said the program shall reflect commitment to time for instruction.
Okay.
And we don't have to accept those, right?
Like, yeah. I'm not sure if I'm either way. I mean, I get where they're wanting to go. I just get a little bit concerned when they make it such the board's commitment to provide adequate time. What happens if there's not adequate time? What's the consequence if it's the board? I mean, it just is kind of a weird.
Right, because the board doesn't control how time is used anyway.
No, we set the calendar and we adopt things to make sure that classrooms instruction meets state regulated times, but let's try it. Let's see if we get some conversation.
Okay. And then this next section is really a header, and they added a bunch of different layers of shall manages. I mean,
right.
And those didn't show up as choices like some of the others did.
So it's interesting kind of reading it. What it feels like is it's back to the wellness committee that we had like 10 years ago. Because a lot of these things were things that were sort of discussed in that committee, but then that committee had sort of a weird dynamic. Who were they responsible to, and how did their recommendations get to policy, get to implementation? So,
and I think part of it for us is we do have a nutrition. We have someone in the finance department that really is focused on the nutritional pieces, working with Chartwells.
And then our service provider is.
And then we also have standards that are part of health curriculum, which covers a lot of this also. Yeah, but the wellness committee itself was not something that just worked well for us.
Yeah.
Um,
It, I mean, the way that we had it before, it was simpler. This again feels like extra record keeping
mhm,
for what? And because they're already, record keeping is already in place.
yep,
And that's with, especially the nutritional manager, that the money that we get goes to the students in a manner that is appropriate. And the time, and it doesn't impact the education time, instruction time.
so. So we reached out to OSBA for additional kind of
Uh-huh.
feedback, and so they said we need to include the annual notification requirement, which to me is not this first section. The
No.
notification requirements at the top of page 2,
Right,
the triennial process of progress is on page 2 as well.
right,
The nutrition education piece is on page 3. The physical activity piece is on page 5. And then the last thing is promoting local wellness. So I don't see in her notes that that these added pieces for implementation are required. Is that how-
sorry, I'm reading through some more of these red parts and, well, first of all, some of it feels like it's AR as opposed to policy.
Mhm.
And the second of all, it does feel a little bit why we went kind of away from the wellness policy, wellness committee. Who was checking? Did we want to devote that much resources
Right.
to that? And what happens if we don't? And because page 2 is not too bad, except we have to keep track of progress.
Mhm.
And then you get to page 3. And that's where we have the culturally relevant, throughout their school years. And teachers will receive curriculum specific training.
There's a whole lot of those I would strike.
Yeah, yeah, and I would absolutely support engaging families and community in healthy snacks and meals. However, where is the line on that one? That line gets real blurry.
Mhm.
And do we encourage kids to bring a reusable water bottle? And how do we keep track of those?
Sometimes, and that's messy too.
Yeah, I would think
Mhm.
some grade levels easier than others. I get it. They want to limit waste.
So like on that list, I would probably keep numbers 8, 9, and 10.
Uh-huh.
Because those are the pieces, like they're getting age appropriate.
And is that in our
Instruction
health,
piece.
is that in our health
Mhm.
curriculum already?
Yep. Yep, and then 9 is the culturally relevant participatory activities related to standards. I would leave that part. There is some health specific training that teachers receive, so we can just leave those 3.
Mhm.
Because at the bottom it says these goals are examples. Districts are required to include goals, but we don't have to use those goals.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would pick 8, 9, and 10 based on what I know us to be doing.
Right,
I think number 12 could be a maybe. Where it's like, to the extent practical, will include
right.
families and community organizations.
Yeah, and what's a community organization?
That might be our Sun Partners, or that might be,
Okay, okay,
that's the one that most
okay.
comes to mind.
Okay. And the number, sorry, if you said it's number 13, part of the health curriculum?
No, I wouldn't do 13.
No.
We don't actually, yeah. But I
Okay,
know I
not
said number
policy.
12.
Yeah.
Number 12 might be a maybe, like we would try to
Okay.
include or.
Uh-huh, and that makes sense, that if we're spending the day where kids are getting a breakfast and a lunch, and then they go to after school or they go to Sun and they're given sugar sweet sodas, and I would doubt that would happen, but
Yeah.
they're giving things that don't really fall within the guidelines.
Or
And does this-
champions or.
Right, champions, or even, I mean, how far do we go? Do they talk with the coaches about, I'm sure the coaches are probably more aware of kids eating healthy, so they have the best physical aspect to be able to do whatever sport they're doing,
You'd think,
you think?
but I don't know that that's
Okay.
something that.
Okay. Okay. Um. hmm. And then did you say yes or no on 14? Because I don't like
14, I wouldn't
Okay.
do,
Okay.
13, I wouldn't do,
Okay,
11 even I wouldn't do.
right.
I would prefer 12 to 11. Some of them just feel really redundant.
Well, either redundant or overstep a little
Yeah,
bit. And how would
exactly.
we know? We would
Yep.
spend more time trying to track that than we would actually getting the benefit.
Mhm.
If it just becomes part of the tagline on the school newsletter that goes out or something like that, but
Mhm.
not to the amount that they want that.
Yeah.
And again, how are we including families in nutrition education? And unless we are really, really, really staying on top of, um, cultural aspects of food.
Yeah. So when I
That
think
could be
about, I think
touchy.
elementary school is easier.
Uh-huh,
Because the curriculum we have are little magazines that they, study it at school and they take it home, almost like a weekly reader from the days
Okay.
of old, right?
Okay,
Like you
yep,
do your
yep,
thing in
yep,
school
yep,
and you
yep.
take it home. So that's
Okay.
a connection to home.
okay.
Middle and high school don't do that though.
No, and the only thing with, certainly with high school where they have more mobility to be
Mhm.
able to leave campus
Mhm.
or do different things, would be nice for them to at least understand that coffee is okay, but coffee loaded up with all the sugar is just the same as a soda,
Right.
kind of thing.
And that
But
does
it
happen
comes-
in their health classes, but I mean, as far as communicating
And
that
when do
home,
they take their health classes?
it's
That's,
different at each. I
Okay.
think at one of them, it's 9th and 11th grade
Okay.
and it's 9th and 10th grade.
okay. All right. I think you're gonna get a little bit of pushback from the board on some of this.
On wanting to be more.
Yeah, I think they would rather, we want to make sure it's in the health curriculum, but
Mhm.
not get engaged as much in what feels like monitoring.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
What about number 2, Tracy? Is that no? I would say no. I just don't know what that looks like. I feel like people just made up goals to stick in here. So that very top one, I wouldn't include.
and so then the numbering will be
The numbering's all completely
Yeah,
off.
yeah, because they
Yeah.
cut and pasted
Even
to
the
the other.
pages. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So I would
Um,
leave
well-
8.
I mean, 2 is not bad, actually. I mean, consistent nutrition message, that's just a poster, a thing.
But where is the poster, the thing,
Yeah.
I
in the
mean, then
hall, in
it's,
the
I guess, the
cafeteria.
Chartwell's newsletter or,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. It just feels squishy to me.
well, and it feels squishy. I don't know how much we still do, if at all, food-based fundraisers.
That's also in here as we'll try to encourage non-food based ones.
Where's that at next? page?
That's way back on page 6. So
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
section, so this section is how are you gonna promote nutrition education? And when we talk, I guess when I think about nutrition education, I think about what's in our standards that we're required to teach.
Right,
And then it gets into on page 5, it gets into PE pieces. So physical education
Mhm.
pieces. So on this one, I would keep 3 and I would keep 19 and 20.
uh-huh,
And keep it just really clear about the instructional pieces.
right. And it's 21, that's statute, right?
That's statute, and it even says that below, like this doesn't have to be in here.
Yeah. Um. Sure, it's Sean, we take that real quick. Hey, Sean. Policy meeting, what's up? That's okay, I took it real quick, but. Now, the what should be dropped? Sorry, I didn't quite hear that. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I've already submitted it. So, so I'll call you. I'll talk to you about that later. Okay, okay, thanks. All right, okay, bye.
Um. So there's a whole bunch there for PE.
Yeah, okay. So we off of page 3 that we also have that nutrition promotion thing.
Yep, so the nutrition promotion thing, I would just do the ones that are related to the standards for nutrition.
Uh-huh,
And then the
Okay.
one, the next part is about physical education, and I would just do the minimal ones that aren't just part of what we have to sign off on Division 22. It doesn't make
Right,
sense.
right, right.
To me, so I would do 3, 19, and then 20, and I'd
Okay,
strike the rest of them.
okay.
Not that they're bad, I just don't feel
They
like
just
they're
don't belong
helpful
in
or
policy.
necessary.
Yeah,
Right.
they're part of our health curriculum.
Yep,
As they need to be.
yep,
But then some of the other parts, I mean, like the paragraph that doesn't have a number on it, nutrition promotion, including marketing, advertising, will be implemented through comprehensive in the classroom, cafeteria, and at home. No, I don't want a whole lot of class time taken over for this, and I don't want to be looking like the food police
mhm,
with families, so, okay,
mhm.
okay. Okay. And so if we do control the sale of all competitive foods, so those are foods that are sold during lunchtime, is that the deal? Is that what competitive foods are?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
during a meal period.
so does that mean if students, I don't know what the fundraising is like anymore. If they're selling candy bars, can those not be sold during lunch? And do they even still sell candy bars?
They do, I mean,
Okay,
yes.
okay, it's an option,
Mhm.
okay,
There's something in there where you can still sell the things that are a part of those, but I think it is mostly about meal periods.
right, but that's what, the district controls the sale of all competitive foods.
Yeah,
And anything that's sold to the students during the school day. Um, meets or exceeds SMART.
that is.
So again, I
Probably
feel
an
like we're
area
going
where we're not
backwards.
in
I feel like we're going
compliance.
backwards on this one.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
alright,
gonna be an area where we're not in compliance, I believe.
okay, okay. And then the minutes, that's statute, right? Sorry, I'm back on page 5 now, the PE stuff.
Page 5, yeah, so on page 5, I would keep number 3, that
Uh-huh,
first one.
right,
that
and
is
19
course
and
of study,
20.
And then 19 and 20.
Okay,
I would strike 21, 22.
got it. Okay,
And then even the next page has 4 more,
right,
5 more that I wouldn't include.
yeah,
It's basically the rules of the statute that we have to sign off on every year.
right,
And then when you get into the section, that's other activities that promote
Right.
wellness. I would keep 27,
okay,
29,
got it, non-food related, okay,
30,
okay.
and 34.
Um. Gotcha, so. Because the beginning of that is the district will provide. The following activities, so 31 wouldn't stay on their intramural because that's,
What is, I mean,
I don't know what.
and what
yeah,
does that lock us into?
Right, same with the monthly, weekly school walks, I
Right,
think,
like it could be a fun idea, but.
but which, yeah, where do you take it and
Mhm.
again, who's monitoring that?
Mhm.
Okay,
So safe routes to school is something that our city supports with
Right.
our school, so I feel like that one's safe. I think we already try to promote non-food related fundraisers, although there are food related fundraisers also.
Mhm, mhm.
I think the physical activity energizers, that's part of good teaching too,
Right, and
right?
teachers do that. Yeah,
So
that
we
just
do
kinda-
that.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
And then use of alternates to food as rewards. I think we
Yeah.
also encourage
And
that.
if we've been doing that at least for a while, that's kind of come out of the
Mhm.
wellness committee. I
Mhm.
remember
But
that.
there still is food as rewards as well.
Yeah,
Like,
just smaller pieces of, and do we have, when we, I don't even know what we have assembly schedule anymore. We have in the
varies.
elementary school, more of them, middle, high school,
Yeah,
not so much.
yeah, and for different purposes.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, okay.
So I just don't think we'd want to commit our schools to,
No,
it's not that it's bad, but I just don't want us to put something in
no,
here that we can't
no.
follow through on.
And I think again, that's part of the health curriculum.
Mhm.
Okay. And that way it's more manageable and more structured, that
Mhm.
one school's doing it, one school's not. So,
Mhm.
okay,
And then there's 4 more at the top that I just wouldn't include.
nope. Um. Nope.
Maybe 36, because now we have
Uh,
SEL standards, but I feel like then we have SEL standards.
I think we have SEL standards.
So then leave that out.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah, that, I mean, I can kind of see where they're going on that. You can. You can be struggling with a food issue that is either causing or as a result of a mental health
Mhm.
or emotional. But I think again, that falls within whatever, it's a bigger picture than just
Mhm.
food. In
Yeah.
that regard, so, okay. Okay. Uh. And then, did you cross out 38?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And kind of going back to what you were saying at the very beginning,
Mhm.
I kind of like our paragraph around implementation better than their paragraph implementation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more straightforward. And it says it's gonna be done at a higher level. It's not gonna be pushed down as an obligation for the classrooms, because then you'll get inconsistent responses. And that defeats the purpose then.
So for implementation, we would keep our old language.
Yep.
Both paragraphs? Yep, just as is in the old one.
Mhm.
And then notification of policy, which is on page 2. I think those 2 sections are 2 of the sections that they identified that we were missing. So that notification of policy and triennial progress
Oh,
assessment.
okay.
I think those are things we do need to add.
Okay. Um. Okay.
Basically posting our policy
Right.
and reviewing our policy.
So I have thoroughly enjoyed when I have gone to some of the school, um. Evening events where
Mhm.
they've had families and things come in, and the food has been locally provided.
Mhm.
Do we have to monitor that? Because it's not gonna necessarily fall within this, but I'm not gonna take it away. Right?
I don't know.
Because back here, we're supposed to be culturally responsive
Mhm.
and celebrate,
Mhm.
so,
There's a fine line and a balance there.
yeah, okay, all right.
Okay, and then we went through the other sections with what we would keep. I think our approach was kind of less is more and
Mhm.
things that we're mostly already doing and represent. Something that feels very doable for schools. If the
Right.
board has conversation that some of this stuff is more that they want to add,
Mhm.
then I will probably recommend, Chris, that we get more feedback from staff about what that implementation would actually
Right,
look
and
like.
I would think my gut is that less is more, so that it's not the food police,
Yeah,
trying to do that. And a report, who's gonna read the report? What's the point of the report? What is it showing? Where if you give information that's available on the same pages where they see the school menu. Would be a
Mhm.
good place, something like that incorporates it into something that we're already doing, so it could be on, Chartwell's uses an app, right?
And Chartwell's has tons of
Yeah,
nutrition
yeah, yeah.
information, and they have all kinds of different things where they're encouraging kids to try different fruits and vegetables, and
Mhm,
you know, a lot of that is with
Mhm.
what they do with us.
okay.
So, okay, so part two of this meeting, so that didn't end up being so bad.
Right, right,
Part two is the naming of new facilities.
right,
And so you have some different things there.
mhm,
One place you have blue language,
right, right,
so keep that one handy. That's some stuff that I just started drafting.
okay,
So very, very rough.
okay.
There's also some samples. We pulled samples from Beaverton,
Mhm,
from Medford, and from PPS.
okay,
Medford and Beaverton. This one's Beaverton, just has the FF, that's
Okay.
Beaverton.
okay.
And then one right behind it is
I saw
Medford.
that, and then PPS.
Yep. And
Okay.
Medfords and Beavertons are very similar to ours. And both require that, which ours does as well, that someone be non-living.
And non-living for more than 3 years. on the
Yes,
license.
one of them's 2 years, one of them's 3 years.
Mhm. Oh, this is interesting. They're
They're,
Beavertons. Not naming stuff inside the building. Hmm,
so not giving separate names. So there were just some things about these that were kind of interesting food for thought.
right,
Portland's honestly is so big and messy that I think maybe we think about if there's pieces of language that maybe we want, but honestly, some of it gets into there's some special recognition kinds of
uh-huh,
sections, like that piece might be helpful. So that's at the bottom of page 2 onto page 3.
mhm.
Um,
Already reading something, it's like, I don't know that they really follow something. Okay.
so yeah, so I don't know how much we want to get into PPS, so that when I started
Mhm.
doing was on the sheet with the blue.
Oh, but it is interesting, though, I mean, we might wanna consider at least the one part in there that caught my eye was the charter schools. They have quite a few more charter schools. The two things they've said, one, charter needs to be a part of the name, so that it doesn't confuse that it's not, and it can't have the word neighborhood. Because you can come from any place to be in a charter school.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting component, as one of our charter schools went through a renaming. That I thought they did very well with. But we hadn't really specified or said anything about what they should lean towards or not lean towards, so.
So theirs goes into just a whole lot more than,
Right, well, and they've got a
Most
bigger
others.
area, a more spread out area and way more schools.
Yeah.
And and do they talk about, I'm scanning, but do they talk about naming? No, because their first thing, does it say name the whole thing?
the naming of all district properties, not limited to schools, facilities, programs, non-school facilities, as well as mascots, symbols, and other images.
Mhm. And our
Is the
mascot's in a
responsibility of the
separate,
board.
mascot's in a separate policy, right? Tracy,
Yes,
okay,
yeah,
Okay.
schools do that.
okay, but it
Talks about
sounds like,
soliciting input,
right,
people can make requests. And then the
Mhm.
steps the board would take. They really focus on relevancy to local
Mhm,
connection,
mhm,
and
mhm.
I don't know. I don't see what it says about whether someone's alive or
It
deceased.
does, I thought in theirs, oh, in Portland's,
Yeah,
um.
I don't think it's in there. So it doesn't specify.
Oh, no, on the second to the last page, it says not necessarily deceased.
Oh,
They can be named for former school district employees, citizens, or students, not necessarily deceased, who've made specific contributions to education within PPS.
okay.
And they can name locations inside the schools and school facilities.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So there's some things there that might be helpful. What I tried to do was think about on this one with the blue,
Uh-huh,
at the top is our current policy.
Right.
Just
right.
copied and pasted there, which is pretty straightforward if you're talking about naming a building, a site,
Like when-
or a facility.
Right, when we did Springwater Trail, when we did
Yep.
Open Cedars.
So then I started thinking about the feedback that I felt like we gathered when we talked to the board and started
Mhm.
drafting the two sections below. So if we felt like that there should be an opportunity to name areas or spaces in a school, like a
Mhm.
library, a gym, or a cafeteria,
Mhm.
maybe there is a way
Oh.
to do that, and maybe
Uh-huh.
it's 5 years and then it's revisited in 5 years. And
Oh,
that,
either do an extension or,
yeah,
somebody
or
else
it's
the
not
opportunity.
relevant anymore, or it's
Uh-huh.
whatever. And then the second piece, there's a lot of conversation about plaques with the
Right.
board. So I added and I just made this up,
okay.
but special honorary plaque.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
A plaque in honor of an individual's special contribution or accomplishment may be placed in a school or district facility with approval for the board for a period of 5 years. The end of the approved period, an extension of an additional 5 may be granted. Plaques may honor living or deceased persons. I thought maybe a plaque is a way to do living or deceased,
Mhm.
and maybe then we leave the rest of the policy with
Right,
non-living, I think is,
and I think in one of them, either in the PPS or, well, was it Beaverton? Um. Oh, 3 years, deceased 3 years.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, Medford's is 2 years, and we didn't have an amount of time.
no. And it might be interesting because, Gresham City Hall went through a naming when they put in the new street there where it's Civic Drive now. There were other options that they wanted to name it, and
Mhm.
it was a good conversation that they had, and
Mhm.
part of it was the person hadn't been deceased very long,
Mhm.
and, there wasn't a lot of community support.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah.
So, and the other, this would be just in part of a conversation maybe with it as a, need to add an AR to a policy that's not very long. Some mention's been made about not having spaces, buildings, whatever, that have similar names. We have that already with East and East, East
Mhm.
Orient, East Gresham.
Mhm.
That was again, one of the other things that the city had with their not naming was the suggested name was too close to
Mhm.
something else that had the same name, and it would be confusing for people. So that could be something as well, when someone's looking for a naming, then, would that be one of the criteria? And did you specify in here that we would get, community? Yeah, parent groups, students and
Yeah.
residents will be considered. And so would we be specific, because that just sounds more, that's part of our policy already. That sounds more like somebody can just recommend something, but it doesn't really call out, do we have an opportunity then to have a specific committee? Hey, we've got a new building. We want broader community input on what the name of this building might be.
It just says the board may establish a committee for screening, reviewing, and suggesting names. The very end of current.
Oh, there we go. Okay, there we
Um,
go. It's there. All right, okay.
And I don't think we're gonna be having a new facility.
No, but whether or not
soon.
we, and is it really, maybe that's part of my continuing question as well. Is this only naming new facilities?
Mhm.
Is there a time period when we go back and look at the name of something?
Mhm.
You know, maybe Gresham High School doesn't want to be known as Gresham High School anymore. Do they
Right.
want to be known as something else? A turf field that might, after 15 years, want to be
Mhm.
renamed to something else. So it's not necessarily new stuff, but it's
Yeah.
that opportunity to see a new deal.
Mhm.
And then plaques,
So I guess I felt like that part in black, like what we had,
uh-huh.
for me is about some whole facility.
Mhm,
And maybe it just needs to be labeled more clearly.
mhm.
And
Did we want to
then,
add the deceased a couple of years at least?
um,
Because it just says names of living will not be considered, but do we want to put a little bit of a timeline?
deceased less than, and yeah, deceased less than,
I like 3
2,
years.
3,
I like
okay.
3.
Okay. So we could update that. And then that's where I just was like, so then maybe, because what is surfacing besides just naming a building
Mhm.
is a field, is a gym,
Right,
is a library, is a
Right.
counseling center, right?
right,
So then that's maybe where there's that next section.
right.
And then it does sound like people may want the plaque option.
Mm-hmm,
And I even played with language around how do we encourage a plaque option?
mm-hmm.
But still felt like. And I picked 5 years just as a,
I think that's a good, otherwise we're changing them so much.
it's
And
probably some change on a board in 5 years.
Mhm,
It's the
mhm.
changeover of a student body in 5 years.
Right,
Um,
okay. Does that put any kind of onus on the building that has it to make sure that they know why that space is named for that person? Recommending or recognizing the significance of that person? Is that?
I mean, if they don't know,
Mhm.
then that might be a signal that it's time to change.
Yeah,
Right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
if the story hasn't lived on,
right, right,
or if there's no longer a personal connection.
right.
But I think we'd have to almost do it as an annual board thing where we have a spreadsheet somewhere where we're seeing if there's any that are up and kind of coordinating.
Because I think some boards would
Buildings to do
be
that.
kind of surprised how many spaces we have named that
Mhm.
didn't necessarily come through the board
Mhm.
for adoption.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I like the idea of at least deceased a couple of years, so that in the heat of the moment, you can make sure, is that really a suitable space? Is
Yeah.
that a reflective space?
Yeah.
And so anybody that puts up, if they put up a sign or plaque or something, it's up to the school district or school, individual school to pay for their own
Mhm.
thing. Okay.
So I think we could do a couple of things.
Mhm.
We could add the deceased more than 3 years
Right.
language to the top section. And then add in these additional 2 sections and just
Okay.
take it to the board and just get more feedback.
Okay.
Um,
Because, I mean, here's one, you know, we had 2 long-term, educators at Gresham High School in the theater arts and fine arts. Someone might, our auditorium isn't named for anyone,
right.
so they might want to do that.
Mhm.
Or some other component of the building,
Mhm.
might want to recognize and acknowledge 30 years of service in one building.
Mhm.
Um,
And that would be a perfect plaque.
that'd be a
Right?
perfect plaque. I like that idea of a plaque. And then after 5 years, someone can say, I'd like a plaque, because you don't have to be deceased to get a plaque.
Right.
Okay, I like that idea as well. Okay, I can live with this.
And I could also live without the middle section, like without the, like, maybe we don't name spaces. Maybe if it's about a whole building, it's the
Mhm.
top part. If it's just about
A
a
plaque,
space or
a
something, then
library
it's a
or,
plaque,
then it's a.
and then it's done.
Yep, yep,
And even the spaces that we have that are currently named after someone that may or may not be alive,
right.
that
right,
could be changed to a plaque at this point.
Right, right, because I know of a few of those.
Mhm.
I just had, so then back to how. How is this moving forward then? Um,
We'd
a
have
field,
to-
a field that's been named that for 100 years.
Well, I
mean, how
think-
do we, and what is the significance of that? Does anybody know
Right.
who that person, do they teach the students? Here's
Right.
why your space is named that.
I think we would have to work on a process for schools to evaluate some of their named
Okay.
spaces.
Okay.
To either replace something
Mhm.
with a plaque or to reevaluate if there's a different name,
Mhm. And so for some
kind
of
of
these that have
sunset some
been,
things out.
yeah, and for some of them. I could see where there would be more. Desirability to keep something because as someone who went to the school 20, 30, 40 years ago, maybe not 40. Yeah, no, 40, okay. That I don't know how their connection would be to renaming it other than
Mhm.
familiarity.
Right.
And so having that conversation about it's a new generation, it's a new group of
Mhm.
students, it's a new. And as long as it's a respectful process, that it's not going to be just named as something. And name something that is relevant to the area
Mhm.
as well.
So, like, currently Barlow Stadium does not have a name, right?
No, I don't believe it
But
does.
Gresham's does. So
Right.
Gresham's could just
Right.
now be a plaque formerly known as something.
Right,
Stapleton,
right, dedicated to.
Dedicate,
Stapleton.
whatever.
Yeah,
And
something,
then it doesn't have to be as,
right, it's just the Gresham Field. Because sometimes when you say it, if you're not from the area, where is that?
right.
What is that? Is that at the school? Or is that someplace else? Because it's not named at the school. So where is it at?
Mhm.
And you could have someone that's living, be a plaque. With all the work that was done out, as for example, Barlow's turf.
Yeah.
Area, there were quite a number of community members that really put a lot of work and effort and part in that.
Mhm.
Could be a deal.
Mhm.
Okay. And then we do have, so this is all the naming part, which goes kind of hand in hand. With the policy of. A new building that has. Construction plaque stuff on it. And that includes board members, superintendent, because we went through a whole big process on that to make sure that, that make sure. Who was gonna be on it so that it wasn't too long, and it stays on there. Because it's not changing the name of the building in any way, it just says this building was built in X date. Here were the people involved, here was the contractor involved, superintendent at the time, and how it was paid for. Because I know there are several of those around. Yeah. And I guess those just stay up as long as the building is intact. And they typically are near the front door, they're not inside the building. Right, they're on the outside, and they're just sort of a record of, it's more of a historical record. How did this building get here? So that's not really a naming, that's a separate, we have that in a separate policy somewhere. And in that separate policy, then it has the list of who is identified on the plaque.
Yeah.
And everyone that was involved in it in a direct, positive way is on the plaque.
Yes.
Okay.
And I just remembered, as you're talking about additional policies, on the back, there is a policy
Oh.
specific to memorials.
Okay.
So that is our current policy.
Okay. Oh. Okay. I think I would separate those out.
These
know,
are,
yeah,
yeah.
but
these
I
are
mean,
two
I would,
policies.
but I wouldn't include. That a room or item may be named for the person in whose honor the scholarship is created. Those are two separate things. Aren't they? And is a scholarship only a memorial scholarship? It can't be for someone who retired? Because someone who's 35 years in the district and retires would have significant impact
Mhm.
if they wanted to create a scholarship. Can they? It doesn't sound like they can based on this. It's a memorial scholarship as opposed to just a,
So maybe in this one, we would just want, because there's a talks about memorial plaque, maybe we would just want to reference
yeah,
policy, is it FF?
yeah,
Okay,
okay.
this is just one of those that's gonna end up being a bit of a can of worms.
It has been for a while. And again, you can have a scholarship memorial without necessarily putting a plaque up.
Right,
And I think,
yep,
um. Yeah. But that's another one where I could see Gresham, the fine arts, if there was a scholarship initiated there. Does that mean you automatically get to name the facility now? No, or the room or whatever. So. Okay. Thank you for all the work that you did on this one. I just kept bringing it up, didn't I? So we still haven't really addressed the Stapleton field. the
no,
longevity,
but we
but at
could,
least we can,
I think so in all my crazy notes from the board, what I kept
Uh-huh.
hearing from them is like, what can we do about somebody who has something significant that has happened now?
right,
That might still be living?
yeah,
To me, then
So
at
that's a
least a
plaque.
plaque falls into that and
Yeah.
it's got a time period connected to it,
Yeah.
because the time period, I think, helps with some of the other issues that were
well, it
popping
keeps it
up.
current in front of the
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
Because the students then have a connection to it.
Mhm,
100 years, not very many people have a connection to that.
mhm. Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering about just drafting like this, and
Mhm.
we can do it with the old format, like
Uh-huh.
highlighting and whatever of new language, and just have more conversation
Okay,
with the full board at our work
Okay.
session to see
Okay.
if we're closer, what parts they like,
Right,
what parts
right.
people don't like.
and look up the policy where it has the new construction list of people to make sure that we're using separate, consistent, distinct language, because if
Mhm.
we're calling this a special honorary plaque, and if
Yeah.
that's a building plaque, the building construction plaque doesn't come off as long as the building stays up.
Right.
And again, that has specific people by
Mhm.
title that are on that plaque.
Yeah. And do you think it would be helpful for us to have any of these extra policies, these samples for reference?
Just say that you did reference other
Okay.
policies, and that was where we came up with, being deceased a certain amount of time before you
Mhm.
consider it, having a time limit on how long a
Mhm.
space can be named for
Mhm.
someone, the plaque and,
Okay.
FFB is the names on building
Okay.
plaques.
oh, okay, thank
So
you.
it might be helpful for us to look at a new draft of this, but also have FFB to look at and FFA, which is the memorials one on the back, because
Okay.
they all have
Right,
some overlap.
right. Some overlap and some separate, because again, the FFB is not creating a new name for anything.
Mhm.
The building's already got a name. These are just the people that were involved in getting it there.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay,
Oh, and so just a second, let me read this real quick. So even if I was just looking at Medford's, so they do a full facility, and I don't think that's what we're looking at. We're looking at being able to do the plaques.
Mhm.
Okay. Do separate spaces. And do they still, here's the question as well. Do, whether it's a honorary plaque or a renaming, are those all coming to the board for adoption?
I wrote them that way, that they were
Okay.
approval from the board.
Okay, I see that. Because that was sort of a question I'd had, that some spaces were coming up with names that had not come to the board.
Mhm.
And they also I guess if it's a plaque, it can be living or deceased.
Mm-hmm,
Okay. But it still needs to come to the board so that we know
mm-hmm. There
consistency
still needs to be awareness and a
Yeah.
process for
and a
it.
process. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
But it would be deceased for the naming of an
Naming.
area or a space.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And
And
we're
I
gonna,
think I would add field, Chris, as you've been talking, where I put
Mhm.
example, library, gym, cafeteria, I think I'll put field in that
Mhm,
parentheses also.
because before, I think when our fields were kind of literally a field, you brought your own chair to sit. It was not a stadium,
Mhm.
which has a little bit more connotation of a space,
Mhm.
of a distinct space.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the whole field, component. Um. And I mean, what I was just saying a second ago, would somebody want to name the theater
Right.
after someone?
Right.
So again, it's a major space that has kind of a standalone component. It's
Mhm.
not a classroom
Mhm.
in its way of students coming and going
Mhm.
in a math class, but
Right.
it's a building, it's a space that has very distinct
Yeah.
function to it.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, I can think of a few names I'd like for plaques on things now.
Well, that could happen too.
Yeah,
All of a
yeah,
sudden, we're
yeah,
getting
yeah.
inundated.
Well, it might, but then we've got a timeline.
Yeah.
And a way of saying, all right, you got your 5 years, somebody else coming in. So let's not do like a carved in marble,
Mhm.
really fancy.
Mhm.
And do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, this will at least get the next layer of conversation going.
right, right,
Gets us closer.
right. Just look at one more place. Oh, you can't do that. Because there have been also, I was just looking to see whether or not there was an implied age of someone. They have had schools that have named spaces for students.
Mhm.
And so that, I don't know how they did that, what process they used. So. Okay, okay,
In the absence of a process, people make up their own.
yeah, well, and that's then where it gets inconsistent and who gets preference and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And how come you're more important and I'm not, or my person that I thought was important doesn't even get considered,
Mhm.
so. Okay, was that it?
Those are the two.
All right, perfect, perfect,
Yeah.
okay.
I
So-
thought maybe we'd be drafting language in here and then I just kind of went for it. I had a
Yeah,
little
no,
time
no.
and just kind of went for it.
Because
to
then we could
see-
look at it and see where were there gaps in it and, yeah, and it's interesting that Beaverton's is so short and Portland's just goes on.
Uh-huh.
But also Portland does their own policies. They don't do them through OSBA.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So we'll take those to the work session. Is that next
Next
week?
week, yeah.
That's next
Okay,
week. So we'll
then.
work on kind of cleaning up. I'll share this.
Okay,
copy.
yeah, that would be the June 18th work session
There. And all of our other policies. We made that one correction
Right,
on the 6th through 12th
Right,
grade,
right,
but the
right.
rest of them were approved.
okay,
We have some AR work to do as a leadership team here, but
okay,
we can get on that.
okay. All right, so this policy meeting is adjourned.